Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert, author of Visualizing Happiness in Every Area of Your Life and host of this podcast, Incredible Life Creator. And today I have Miss Lorna Gale on with me. Hey, Lorna.
Hi, Kimberly. It's good to be here.
Yes, just so people know you, I'm going to go ahead and just read your short bio.
Sure.
Lorna Gale is a sex and spirit alchemist of the feminine led life, somatic sexologist, intuitive energy healer, Bondassage, I don't know if I'm saying that right, trainer, an award-winning speaker. Lorna has been a teacher in leading people on transformative journeys for over 25 years. She creates safe and sacred places, catalyzing potent transformations in the lives of people so they can feel at home in their bodies and relationships, express themselves authentically, and experience sexual freedom and spiritual wholeness. Lorna is a poet, writer, and a frequent guest on podcasts and TV shows. Speaking of the spiritual erotic realm, where divine feminine energy and sacred masculine form reflect spirit in the human experience. Through their work with Lorna, people are coming home to themselves sexually and spiritually. All right. Well, I'd just love to hear your story and how you started out and how you got into all this.
Well, as we were saying before we came on, Kimberly, that everybody has quite a journey, right? When we really start to look at it and appreciate it, it's kind of like, wow, amazing, all of the things we've experienced and how it so perfectly brings us to this place where we are now and the transformations that we get to have. It's like those flowers that right start to bud, that the seed that cracks open and here we are. So for my journey, coming from a religious background, that adage of save yourself for marriage, I did. I was a good girl. And I think that's very common for a lot of women and a lot of men as well. Particularly for women, it seems to show up. But this aspect of following this path, like my mom was a beautiful woman who stayed at home, had watched the children, and I thought that's what I want to do is I want to be a wife and a mom. And I got to have that incredible joy of being that. uh, Soon into the marriage, I realized, it doesn't all click together as soon as you get married, as there's that idea. And I really felt that I found out that I was really quite disconnected from my marriage, or pardon me, from my sexuality within the marriage. I hadn't explored myself. And so this idea that save yourself for marriage, at some point it took me to this experience of my body isn't mine, my sexuality isn't mine. It belongs to the husband, it belongs to the man, it belongs to the marriage. So very, very disconnected. Beautiful man that I was married to for 30 years. We had two beautiful children together, two daughters. And in there, I just had this sense that there's something more. There was not this sense of sexual fulfillment, and not for lack of effort on his part. He just said, it seems like from the research, it seems like you, like the majority of women, are non orgasmic. Now, remember, this is 40 years ago. So, where there wasn't this whole sense of being able to access information through the internet. And then 5 years into the marriage, he said, why don't you find out what makes you feel good so you could tell me? Really wise words. But it took me 25 years to start that exploration. It was only once my girls were out of the home that I started to find out, who am I as a sexual erotic being, and became my journey of taking some courses, some trainings, going on retreats, and finding out. And I also hired a masturbation coach. And a lot of men say I had no idea there was such a thing. I didn't know either until I met one when I was facilitating my energy wellness program, a doctorate of human sexuality. She said, why don't we really support you in this way? So I did. And at the age of 42, had my first orgasm. And at age 47, through some of my trainings, I literally met myself in the mirror, both physically as well as spiritually. And there was this awakening that happened, what I call my midlife sexual awakening, and this journey to see myself beyond what I'd been taught, beyond the shroud of shame that I call it, beyond the shoulds and the shouldn't. It's just kind of like, wow, this isn't wrong and dirty and shameful like I've been taught. It's so good and pure and right. And so it became a natural thing for me then to take my love and my gift of teaching from the school system and the energy work into now the sexual erotic realm of things, and support other people in really connecting to their bodies, to their sexuality, and find out, who are they? What is true for them as sexual erotic beings beyond what we've been taught, and be taught beyond those limitations of looking outside of ourselves? Let's come back home. Who are you? What's your truth?
So yeah, because you had said, you said in your bio that you were a school teacher for, quite a few years also. So that teaching came into play when you started teaching others.
Yeah,
So,
very
and
much
then
so.
the energy work you did, what kind of energy work were you doing?
It was a modality where actually it was pretty beautiful because it talked about looking at mirrors. It was really being the energetic, so looking at energy and just being present to, and again, the power of words. So sometimes looking at certain words, how it would create a mirror to be and it was remote sessions, in-person sessions, didn't matter because it was all energetic. And so to be able to shift things in my field to be able to support their healing. So again, mirrors have been a really important part of my world for these last 40 years, and part of my awakenings along the way.
Mhm. And then as you were discovering these things about yourself and, just exploring, what was your husband's reaction? Like, you know,
Mm,
your partner in life, because, you were one way for a long time and then now you're exploring this. Were they
mm.
like, did he want to explore with you, or was he like, this is kind of different?
That's such a great question, Kimberly. When I had was in that exploration, it felt really important for me to. We had planned to move someplace, and he said, "I need to. I'm going to just stay and work a little bit more." We were ready. He was getting ready to retire, and he said, "I'm going to stay and work for a little bit longer." And I said, "I need to go now." So actually, I packed up, and for 2 years we had a long distance relationship, and that's where I had my awakening that really happened. And then when I came back. To spend some time, I thought, oh, we're going to start a new chapter. I soon realized that no, it wasn't about starting a new chapter together. It was actually how do we really honor and celebrate each other and start to go our own places. And I remember him saying to you, what do you choose, the marriage or this new path that is just really calling you? And as I felt in, it felt like I could feel that joy and aliveness of this awakening that I experienced and be able to support other people. And as I felt into staying in the marriage, it felt like a tree that was in a pot that had now become root bound and that it was time to be transplanted. And so I saw the gift of this beautiful marriage that it had served its purpose. And it was time for me now to be transplanted into another experience. And my husband said, whatever you need to do, go with my blessing. He said, it's going to change everything that I have been. He said, go do what you need to do. And so it was with that, that gift of that support that headed on. It wasn't him giving my permission. It was really him honoring that I was stepping into what I needed to do. And I think that's a big part for a lot of people is we
Mhm,
think we need to have permission. It's just kind of no, can we actually just really come and live and be true to ourselves from the inside?
mhm. Is there a reason why he didn't want to take the journey with you?
Hmm. Um, this new world in my career, it was involving as a somatic sexologist. I work with hands-on, so the idea of me having hands on other people's bodies just didn't fit in with him. He
Mhm,
didn't feel comfortable with that. So I love that he was able to say, "This doesn't work for me,"
mhm,
and go do what works for you. So it was really beautiful because I think so many times in relationships we have this idea of somebody bends or dies or suppresses, gives up who they are to be, to please, to make it work for somebody else. And I say, and I remember actually, in those last few days of our being together, I remember crying out and saying, "Why can't we both be true to each ourselves and stay together?" So
uh-huh,
there was that cry, just kind of like, no, I just realized that for me to really be true to myself, for him to be true to his self, that
mhm,
it was really himself. It was actually just no, our paths are now to go from the form that we had known it.
mhm. And that's beautiful. And our family does the same thing. My father's or my kid's dad, we have all our celebrations together. Every holiday, every we celebrate everybody in the family's birthday all together all the
Yeah,
time. And
nice.
we've been divorced, oh, I don't know, 25 years. We've been
Well,
divorced for a long time, but it doesn't matter. We just all keep that family unit together. And I think that's so important,
mhm,
for yourself and your kids because, well, yeah, it's not working as a marriage,
mhm,
but you had a relationship that you built. for
Hmm.
30 years.
Yeah.
So why not have that person in your life as a friend or as a confidant or somebody who knows you so well, even though he's not the same place, you can
Hmm.
still have that connection with the family and keeping everyone together. So I love that you're doing that.
Thank you. And there were a couple of things that came from that, Kimberly. One of them was this idea that, like, at one point, it was kind of like sort of trying to find fault with him or the marriage, to be able to leave it. And then had this awareness that came in: I don't need to make someone or something wrong in order to have another choice, to make another choice. And that to me was just liberating. It was just kind of like, no, what amazing thing this has been, and it's time for a new journey. And as I said to my girls, I mean, it was an adjustment period for all of us. But what I've come to recognize is that what we thought was a breakdown of the family was actually a breakthrough. And instead of it breaking down that way, it actually expanded, because now we've got my former husband and his wife and her
Mhm.
family. They're now a part of it. And,
Right.
my grandchildren, they have, multiple grandpa and grandmas. And it's just
Mhm.
really a beautiful thing. So,
Yes, yes. I love that. I love it when people come together in that way. I think it's amazing.
mhm.
So, so let's talk more about I have a lot of questions.
Okay.
So, first of all, myself included, we grow up in a religious type situation where, you save yourself for marriage, which I still agree with. I mean, if you're that young, what are you doing out there? You
Right.
don't know what you're doing yet. So, why be doing that?
Mhm.
Um, but the thing is that same thing when you all of a sudden find yourself married, at least this was my experience. I was so bound up from saying no, 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 no. And then you get into the marriage and all of a sudden you're supposed to say yes, 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 yes. So this is kind of a complex question, but how do we teach our children to be safe, to honor themselves and their body, especially when they're young, when they're really not ready to make those decisions, um, to go safely into marriage, but go into marriage uh, opening little by little together, maybe as a couple. Do you know what I'm asking? How do we train our kids?
Again, what um, a rich, multifaceted question here. And the way that I see this, Kimberly, is it goes back to, from the time they're born, we are we are supporting them in that journey along the way. And if we can do it as consciously as possible. And the way that I say it, and what I often work with, with people, whether it's men, with women, couples, groups, is I actually say, let's go back and find out that time where you really had the opportunities to really honor your voice and your choice. And it goes back often to children. And here's an example that I like to give, and it seems that a lot of people can relate. And certainly now, as a grandma, I can relate to this. Grandma comes to visit, and she lives far away, and it's time for her to go home. And mom and dad say, "Come and say goodbye to grandma." I don't want to. And maybe the child is, coloring or resting or watching TV. Who knows what they're doing? For whatever reason, they say, no, come and say goodbye to grandma. She's leaving. Mm-mm. Come and say goodbye to grandma. She's going to be gone. You won't see her for a long time. Oh, look, grandma, look how sad she looks. What happens? Grandma lives a long way. If she dies before you come, you'll wish you had done that. So from and those are things that it's not it seems like in some ways that it's about that moment. But when you look at that, what we've done now is there's guilt, there's shame for the child doing it the way they want to do and being able to freely say, I don't want to. We make them feel that they are responsible for an adult's emotional well-being. So there's guilt, there's shame, all of those different things. And so when that gets reinforced over and over and over again, it's, well, who am I? How can I say yes or no? It becomes so clouded. And so, this aspect of allowing children to be able to, as much as possible, to honor what they choose in that moment. They are not. And And children should never be held responsible for an adult's well-being or their emotional well-being. So that's not their job. Our job as adults and parents and grandparents, aunts and uncles, is to be able to support this child and allow them to know, what does that feel like? And I say consent is actually a feeling. What does it feel like when I'm saying yes when it means yes? I'm saying no when it means no. That it's not this whole back and forth. And from there, as children are growing up, and there's that sense of peer pressure, they feel more solid within themselves. They have that ability to say, no, that doesn't feel good. I don't want to hurt somebody else or say something unkind, or no, we're supposed to be doing this. When it comes time to sexual things, as they're growing and their explorations happening, maybe they are curious, maybe they are there, but they're not doing it because there's that sense of, oh, I have to because I'm responsible for that person. Or if I don't do that, they're not going to be my friends. It allows them to stand in their power, to stand in their voice and their choice, and to say, it doesn't matter. And if you're not going to be my friend because of that, then so be it. So we allow them to develop their strength. And as that goes on and on and on, when it comes time for relationships, whether short term or long term, married, exploration, however it is, they're coming from that center anchor and that inner compass, if you will.
I think that's great advice, because that example you gave of the child and the grandparent leaving, I mean, that happens all the time everywhere. You see it everywhere. Or, the same thing, the family member is arriving and they're like, come and say hi. And the kids are like, no, we're playing on the swings. We don't want to say hi to whoever that is. We don't want to, I had someone else give the example of, you know, give your uncle or aunt a kiss and hug. And the kid's like, I don't want to give, that
Mhm.
person's got wrinkles and they look scary. I don't want to hug them or kiss them.
That's right. That's right.
That's what they're thinking. But as an adult,
Exactly.
you're thinking, well, that's kind of your duty as a
Hmm.
little kid, and the aunt wants that hug or kiss or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's where it can really start and build that foundation so that they get and reinforce it and reinforce it and reinforce it. So that's often, like I say, when I'm working with people, I actually go back to that place, not necessarily as a child, but go into those places and find out, okay, try to think of a time, you know, whether it was yesterday, last week, as a child, whatever it was, a time when you said yes and it felt like a yes. Got it? Yeah. Okay. Feel that. Okay. Now give them a moment to do that. And then, okay, think of a time when it was actually a yes, but you said no. And it starts to feel kind of wobbly inside. It kind of like, "Ugh."
Mhm.
And okay, now come back to what it felt like what you said was in alignment with what it felt like inside. So I keep anchoring that back in so that as they go on and making some choices, in the relationships at work with their family, they're coming from that place and kind of, oh yeah, that's what it feels like.
Yeah, that is wonderful, because like you said, you can get over, um, scheduled or anything, because if you keep saying yes when you wanna say no.
So true. So
That is
true.
so true. So, talk more about some of your things. So, you have on here PEP. Talk about
Mm,
PEP. What is that?
Great question. PEP is it's an acronym, stands for Personal Erotic Practice. And it is born out of my own experience. And again, part of my awakening started with, number one, be able to have a bit of an orgasm and find out, wow, this is what my body can do. But it was even more than that. When I had my sexual awakening, I was literally in front of a mirror. And as I was supposed to be in this orgasmic practice, I'm thinking, no. And I met that sense of shame and disgust and self-loathing. And it even took me to the point of existential shame, the shame that I even existed. And once I could get down to the depths of that energy, that wow, I shouldn't even be here. I don't even deserve to be here. It's just kind of like, wow, what an old deep story. And when I could unearth that, that's when things started to, wow, now I could start to really connect into this body and this my sexual erotic energy. And that sense of being. And there's a quote that Audre Lorde has, and it's been really central for me for these 15 years since my awakening. She said, "We tend to think of the erotic as a quick, tantalizing sexual arousal. I speak of the erotic as that deepest life force energy that moves us in a fundamental way." And so when I take people or lead them and guide them and give them tools for their personal erotic practice, it's not about masturbation, it's beyond genitals, it's beyond orgasm. It's about how do we tap into that energy to connect to the wisdom of the body? Can we feel beyond, whether it's feeling physical sensations, feeling the emotions that arise? Can we listen to and tune into that wisdom, as I mentioned, the wisdom of the body, but also the insights that can come through? And it's not just about, oh, here's the sense of masturbation and having an orgasm. It's, can we allow the erotic to be a part of every part of our life? I remember one of my clients, she was in her early 30s at the time, and this was just a couple of years ago. It really resonates with me. She said, when I started um, my PEP coaching with you, and she had connected with me just looking online for somebody to connect to her, help her to connect to her sexuality. And I took her through her PEP program where we talk about breath, sound, and movement and guiding her through some of those. She said, I thought that it was going to be about connecting me and my sexuality with my partner. And she said, it's so much more than that. She said, I found that the erotic is in everything in life. And where it showed up in a big way for her was as a writer. Her writer became prolific. She was getting awards for it. She was getting requests for it. And so it just shows up in everything, because when we connect to that sexual erotic energy, we're connecting into that life force energy and that creative force that we are. And it ripples out and shows up in everything.
Mhm.
So that's what PEP is. That's a little bit of a piece of, is allowing personal erotic practice, that it's not based on what somebody outside says we should do or shouldn't do. It's not even dependent on somebody else. It's, can I connect to this body, to this instrument,
Mhm.
and be alive from here within?
That's beautiful. And I know even in the book Think and Grow Rich, he talks about
Mm.
using that sexual energy to create in the business world.
Mm. Mhm. Mhm.
So that energy is very powerful.
That's true. And we've really been taught to compartmentalize it, right? It belongs at home in the bedroom with a partner, and the various configurations that people experience. And when it's not in those ways that we've been taught, there's the shame and the guilt in many ways happens, because the sense of, oh, I'm being and doing something that I shouldn't. And so it shuts down that part. And then, as you say, it stifles that creativity for our businesses, for our creative ventures, for our relationships, for raising our children. So,
So I wanted to go back to the mirror. So
okay.
there are some people that can stand in front of the mirror and they feel just fine and they can look at themselves and they're like, yeah, hi, hello. and
Yeah.
and then there's other people that they try not to be in front of the mirror at all. In fact, if you ask them, you know, strip and stand right there, they would be so uncomfortable and all this would, like what happened with you would just come up. So when you're working with people that have those feelings towards their body that are not positive, how
Mm,
do you work with them like on a gradient so they can actually I think you call it confront yourself. How
mm,
do I confront myself in front of the mirror when it's so uncomfortable?
mm. It's a great question. I'm going to speak about mirrors in another way and then come back to here. When you look at a mirror, when you look into a mirror, we think, oh, I'm seeing, there I am. It's kind of, no, whatever we see in a mirror, we're actually seeing the opposite. We're seeing not what is, we're seeing what isn't. We're seeing the opposite of. So when we step up to a mirror, is whatever starts to arise, this sense of shame, it's actually the opposite of what's really there. Anything that, anytime we feel to push away, to shut down, to hide from, is is a mirror, because all of, as what the way that I experience it and the way that I teach it is, wherever those places are, there's the gold, there's the power. So to move and to move through the mirror, to move through whatever shows up, if there's that sense of that shame that shows up, can I allow myself to feel it? It's not even here. Oh, I have to try to rationalize and think my way through it. And how do I? It's kind of like, no. If it's bringing up these emotions, these feelings, can I allow myself to feel it, to go through what feels too dangerous, too shameful, too intense? Can I feel what's there? Because when I do that, that's when I tap into the truth of who we are as sexual erotic beings and as divine beings. So that's where I say it's sometimes opposite to what we've been taught of. I say celebrate if those things are coming up, and it's kind of like celebrate those things, yeah,
Mhm.
because that's showing us where our power is hidden. What do we do with something that's valuable? We hide it, we lock it. A
Mhm.
safe in the bank, right, has all these locks, double locks and guards and lasers and all of these things, because
Mhm.
there's something so valuable inside. So it's the same way when shame, when guilt shows up, when something that feels too intense, kind of like, wow, great. There's a lot of power there. And you go back in and just feel it and really come back home into yourself.
So I wanted to ask you about, feminine and masculine power.
Mm.
Um, Again, a very complicated, I have a multifaceted question. So feminine and masculine power, and how do people come together both in their power, but then create this amazing thing together?
Mm, beautiful, beautiful question. When we operate in a world where there is polarity, duality, things are separate. And so we've got this sense that, okay, here's a male, here's the body of a male, here's a female, here's the body of a female, and this journey of, two shall become one. And and again, that's where I look at both the story and as the mirror, because it's actually what we've thought is two. It's creating this experience. What would it be like if we thought that one was two? Oh, okay, they're separate. So to be able to have this experience. So for me, it becomes this journey of, number one, honoring the body that we're in. And when there's a part that we resist and we resent, we reject. Sometimes it's the feminine part of us that we're rejecting, resenting. Sometimes it's the masculine part. And how do we know? If we look at what's around us, I say, whatever's around us is a mirror. So if I'm rejecting or resenting, I have anger towards what might be a male or another female. There's that part of me that I'm rejecting. There being that mirror for me. And so as we come back into this recognizing what is the feminine, and there's often the looking at, we talk about feminine as yin and masculine as yang. It's actually interesting if we start to look at it a little bit differently or expand how we look at it, is there is feminine yin and feminine yang.
Mhm.
There's masculine yin and masculine yang. So that feminine yang, the yin, we're familiar with that, right? We talk about that flow, that nurturing. The yang of the feminine is actually that destructive, Kali, the destructor, that destructive force. No, we're not going to do it. It's going to be a different way. And that righteous anger that's the feminine.
Mhm.
And on the masculine side, there's that yang is that doing, that action, those protecting, providing, all of those things.
Mhm.
And the yin is actually the nurturing. There's all that holding as well, right? The testicles hold that seed of life.
Mhm.
And so that's the yin and the yang of the feminine and the masculine. And so to be able to bring those together and recognize them within ourselves, that we can then recognize when we are where we are. And it's not even about that it's separate. It's just kind of like, no, they're just flowing together. So that's why I don't even talk about the balance of masculine and feminine. I talk about the harmony, if you will, that
Mhm.
flowing, that movement back and together in its various expressions, and that it's all within us. So sometimes a couple, if you will, what might be perceived or as a female and a male coming together gets to enact and work through those places so that we can actually come back into our wholeness. What seems to be outside helps us to come back into this recognition of the oneness within. And then as I experience it and as I teach it as well, is that when we talk about feminine as flow, I say look at that as spirit. Spirit is what flows. And in order for a spirit to have a human experience, it needs form. There's feminine and the masculine. And when we look at how we've experienced life so far in our world, it's very much that the feminine has been down, the masculine up. So I say, okay, in a mirror, let's bring it around.
Mhm.
And so this idea of what I talk about, the feminine led life, for some people that's female led life or relationships, great. And it's even more and even deeper. It's the feminine, it's the spirit that leads. It's the spirit that has this thing that this experience that now has form. And what sometimes can be a bit of a mind bender for some people went from that model that I speak of is that here I am in this kind of a body. Other people, so I have breasts and a vulva. Some people have a penis. That no matter what shape our bodies are, what genitals we have, it's form.
Mhm.
And that life force energy that animates us is the spirit. There we are in our wholeness right away, feminine and masculine, as we are right now. So hidden in plain view, here we are in our wholeness. And we thought we had to look outside, but that's what helps us to come back into the recognition and the experience of our oneness and our divinity.
And I have just like maybe a day-to-day question, maybe in, people who are married or whatever, um, that I know in my relationships, I want a lot of hugs and affection and things like that.
Yeah,
And if I don't get that during the day, then I don't want the other thing at night. Like, no, because I don't feel loved today.
there
So
you go.
it maybe that's immature, I don't know, but I think that might happen in other relationships too. And does that, and how do you negotiate that? Because um you can tell someone what you are wishing for, but
Mhm.
sometimes it's easy for them and sometimes they actually have to work at it, and sometimes I would have to work at whatever they're asking for.
That's true. That's true. A really great point, Kimberly, and for you to be able to speak of that of your experience, and which is probably representative of so many relationships. Big part of it would come down to number one, there's the different love languages that there are some people it's that acts of service. For some people it's the gifts. For some people it's the physical affection. So there's different ways of doing it. And
Mhm.
in my work, what I do is I actually take them through the touch of consent, taking couples through very simple thing, and it's based on. It came from my work in the sexological bodywork training, in that professional training that I took and trained in, and then went on to be uh, the teacher of it in here in Canada, one of the co-teachers, and from Joseph Kramer there, and then Dr. Betty Martin. She took this 3-minute game of consent. She developed a wheel of consent, and so my work that I do, it's based off of there, is I call it the touch of consent. And I take couples and just literally just using their hands. They just use their hands for each in this touch, and I take them through a simple thing of number one, do you want to be touched? And sometimes we think, well, we're a couple, we want to be touched, we should touch. It's kind of, well, maybe in this moment you don't want to. So it goes back to that consent, from as children or our growing up years, to be able to realize, you know what, actually right now I don't want to be touched. And for the other person to not take that personally, but to be able to say, oh, okay, I can honor that. And so it's starting to tease apart these ways of why are we touching? Who are we touching for? Who's touching? Who's giving? Who's receiving? We tease it apart in some ways. And just within these last two, I'm actually currently working with a couple, and it's all online that I've been working with these couples. They've been married for over 30 years. And within the first session, it was just kind of like, wow, they were able to acknowledge some really deep seated and long term emotions towards each other that had come up about feeling rejected, about feeling anger, just with this simple thing. And so in our sessions, continue to dive into and let those surface. Another couple that I recently worked with, they were married 35 years, and they said, wow, we've never done this. I had no idea you like to be touched like this, or I never had this idea that I could even ask for that. So it's sometimes we have this idea of these mind-blowing, orgasms and all of these things. And sometimes it really comes down to these simple things of understanding each other and being able to say what I like, what I don't like, ask for it, and then simply to receive or to give that touch. And what you say talks about, and again, Dr. Betty Martin in her work, she talks very clearly about there's a request, an offer, and an invitation. And each of those are different things. And sometimes they're for one person, hey, I don't really like this, but I know you do. Would you like this? Or I know, so it's sort of looking at it different ways. So those are some simple ways, some really simple, and it doesn't even have to be this. Again, it's not about somebody right or wrong. It's just kind of like, wow, we've never really looked at it this way. What's it like when we can come back to that place of congruence and consent within? What does it feel like? And to act from there.
So my next question is about as we're getting older. So it's been my experience that as we get older,
Mhm.
bodies change, the way they work changes. Sometimes our wish or not wish for sexual activity changes on
Mhm.
both sides, men and women. And, the way you interact with each other physically has to change in some way. So,
Mhm.
what has been your experience and what are some of the things you help people with as they're getting older and basically the parts are working as good as they used to?
Mhm. Yeah, that's really a really um, a, a really tender question for a lot of people because they have this sense that there's something wrong with them, and I just have to settle for it, or I just have to put up with it. And and oftentimes what happens is that when people are coming from that place of what's true for them and that communication is being said, it's actually juices flow and things arise, to be able to have these things. It's often when there's suppressed emotion and there's resentment, the body responds to that. So to try to force something, it just layers on the emotion, it layers on the resentment, the anger, the separation. And so to be able to have these simple ways to be able to to be able to connect and to hear each other without taking it personally, without it being in a sexual context. So that's why we
Mhm.
start with the hand, because even though these hands are often used for sexual activities and explorations, that by and large, overall, that's what they use all over the place. And so in our day to day life, but there's all the neuroproprioceptors that are in our hands that make them so sensitive. And as Dr. Betty Martin says, is that when the hand gets it, the whole body gets it. And so that's what we do is just, hey, how do you want to be touched? Yeah. How would you like to be touched? So some people just like to just hold my hand.
Mhm.
You squeeze it a little bit harder. Okay, yeah. And just being present. Some people, can you just stroke it here? You do that. And that when people can start to take it out of a sexual context, because there's a lot of expectation
Mhm.
when there is sexual activity happening. This idea that it's going to follow this course, and we get very much in our habits, right? It's it follows this course. There's supposed to be foreplay, and it goes this way, and then hopefully we'll both come, and it would be ideal if we could come together. It's just kind of like how many women can't come, don't come. How many men with that performance anxiety can't really perform, they can't last as long as they would like to. So there's all kinds of things that get laden and layered in terms of those sexual interactions. So that's why I say let's start with the hand
Mhm.
and do that, and then after that for some time, like sometimes it's several sessions. Okay, now maybe you want to start to include the face or the back or the belly. And I say leave genitals, let's not go there yet, in this exercise. It's not saying, don't be intimate in between sessions, but for this practice, let's stay with this. And then you can start to little by little start to implement those things. But it's amazing how, a rut happens when we have these habits and ways of doing things, and sort of it's kind of I remember from my experience, because again at 42 was the first time I had an orgasm when I was the age. So there was a lot of times of making love with my husband that I thought, okay, is this going to be the time? Is this going to be time? No. Is this going to be the time? And pretty soon there was that sense of failure, and you know do it to make him happy. And but it's when and again, from my work, women most often arrive to me to say, I want to connect to my body and my sexuality. Men arrive to me saying, how can I be the best that I can be for my partner, for my wife, for my girlfriend? And so a man that feels that, unless, he's really only in it for himself, which the majority of men aren't, you know, well over 50% of men want to be able to really, how can I please you? What do you want? And when the woman doesn't know, it's kind of he's guessing, and then it just becomes this. So we take it back down to this place of, okay, what do you want to be touched? And so as she learns to be able to say that for her hand, then her body can start to relax and know that when that communication is happening with her hand, okay, now it can be my arm, now my back. Then the armoring can start to fall away, that her body can relax. And a man as well, he can relax. He doesn't have to guess. She'll tell me.
Mhm.
Let's explore it together. And so it becomes this beautiful dance, this communication that is goes from a defense and um, protectiveness into this place of openness and exploration, and kind of like, wow. And that's where things then can start to do it. And when a woman can feel that she's being heard, she's being able to, wow, I didn't know I liked that. And you're doing that for me. Her body relaxes. And the more you relax, the more you feel.
Mhm.
And so for everybody to be able to feel more and feel more. So it's really, yeah, it's really a beautiful way to come back no matter what age. And I remember when I first started my practice, there was a woman who she was in her early 70s. And she came to me, she said, I am just, there's this sexual stuff that's happened. I just want it to shut down. Please help me to shut this down. And okay. So, just really went into, incorporated my somatic body work together with my energy work, is just really honoring her. By the end of that first session, she said, I don't want to shut this down. Please help me to bring it alive and really to embrace it. And so over the multiple sessions that we had, she just kept coming back
Mhm.
and more and more feeling alive. She was an artist. Her artwork took on a whole new form. She was getting having displays and showing up in museums, and as a world-renowned artist, it was becoming more prolific again for her. And she keeps in touch with me. Uh, she's now into her 80s, into her mid 80s, and her art has changed, as I said. She is feeling very vibrant and alive. She has found the love of her life, and she is just so and in fact, she would do her pep often when she had her brush in her hand and letting that fuel her creativity.
Mhm.
So there we go. That's what it can be for couples. Is it has nothing to do with age. It's really, yeah, if somebody is feeling resentful, angry, resentful, yeah, that's going to shut down all of the body works. Tap into that, and it's kind of like, wow, I had no idea.
Mhm. So what if someone is single, and let's say they're single by choice. They just it's not interesting for them to be in a relationship. They're really happy with their life and what they're doing, and they're satisfied being alone. How does this apply to them? How do they implement this to for self-care for themselves?
Hmm. Lovely, lovely question. And for me, I say it's come back to yourself, simply because, number one, as a self-care practice, but also it's when we can really come back into ourselves and recognize our fullness, our wholeness within. Then when we are with other people, if we are, whether it's in an intimate relationship, we're in interactions at work, all of those things, we're coming from our fullness. There's not this sense of, I'm incomplete, what's wrong with me? It's just kind of like, no, fill that, it's like a fountain. It's a fountain comes and flows from inside and then it circulates around.
Mhm.
And so I say PEP isn't to do it if your personal erotic practice is not if you don't have a partner or to as a substitute for or somehow settle for. I'm saying no, start there. That's where you really get to connect with yourself, because then it's not this sense of, oh, I need somebody else. It's kind of like I'm whole within. And that energy, that erotic aliveness, that sexual expression. And the goodness knows there's so many beautiful toys that are available for people who want to use those. The ecosexuals who are alive in nature and, hugging trees, and that's a turn on for them. So there's so many ways to be that aren't dependent on somebody else. And it's, in fact, I say, if you're dependent on somebody else, it's a mirror for that invitation to come back and find out, where does it feel like you're lacking, where you're not whole within. And so personal erotic practice is actually where I start people after the consent piece is I start them there is come back home to you, come back home to you.
Beautiful. So if people wanted to connect with you or take advantage of your services, at this point, this is like the commercial part. How do they connect with you? What services are you offering now?
Hmm. A lot of different things. Some of the things that I've mentioned, I offer some that are just sort of standalone services like the PEP. That can be a program by itself. It also weaves into a longer program. So it depends on how people, um, when they chat with me, what is it they're needing. We sort of assess that. It's not a cookie cutter thing. It's kind of okay of these. And I like to use the aspect of a buffet table. And when we go someplace, sometimes there's that appetizer. Some people might want to say, I want to try a little bit of this and this and this. And some people say, okay, and I say, okay, here's a buffet. What do you want to try? So the appetizer and go from there. So looking at that. So people can connect with me through my email address, lorna@lornagale.com. My website, lornagale.com will be available here right away. And by the time we air, it'll be ready to go. In there, it shows various things. Sex like food is one of the things that I offer. And that's when after my sexual awakening happened, I just started having different things came to me about how we do food and how we do sex. And wow, if we could really do sex like we do food, it would be a whole different experience. So that's a workshop that I offer as a group, as well as I do it individually with couples. And it's also the hub, if you will, of a program that really starts to branch in and to look at the various things that come up. PEP can be one of those things that is branched into and worked with that. So there's lots of different ways. I also, as you mentioned about Bondassage, that's one of the ways that I offer work as well, is through the work of BDSM and erotic massage is Bondassage, created by Jaylene Dennis, and she created that. It's a sequence of things that really allows people to go into what I call the restraining power of love, as well as sensation. That it's really a beautiful body of work, and I'm a practitioner of it, as well as I train people to be practitioners. And for me, it's again that opportunity for empowering women and training men. And a lot of people think training men. I think, why do we have so many trainings? We train to be a CPR person. We train to use this software, and so this aspect of training men is actually a tapping into and an honoring of who they are in this human experience, that place of service and provision. And again, remembering that we all have the masculine within us. So sometimes there's that part that the masculine is giving way to the feminine on a human experience, but it also mirrors that spiritual experience in human form. And for women to be empowered for that feminine. So it's really looking at that beautiful way where the feminine is rises and the masculine is in service too. So that's one of the ways I offer that as well, is really, and as I say, the bondage, the way I teach it and use it, is a form of the domination and submission, which is really, for me, it's part of a spiritual awakening. It's that portal to spiritual awakening. So those are some of the ways that people can connect with me. I have my Trusted Bodywork site where I have sort of a menu of things that people can look at and see what catches their attention, and how do we now put together this meal of this program for them.
Great. Thank
And on
you.
Facebook, I'm on Facebook as well, Lorna Gale on Facebook.
Okay. And a personal question now. What gives you the most happiness and fulfillment in your life at this point?
Mm. Uh, um, I would say along, it's really been my daughters and my grandchildren. There's just something about that, an emotion here. It's that creativity that comes from to be able to be witness to that which I've created, but to see them as a life of their own and to marvel at these amazing beings, these beautiful women and their hearts, and to now see them as mothers and the beauty that they bring to the world, and now in their children, their grandchildren. It's just to be able to see life perpetuated and in its beautiful form. So, yeah, it seems like my children and my grandchildren are just the ones that just really that fuel me. And from my husband, I
Mhm.
have a bonus daughter and two bonus grandchildren that they live far away, so I don't get that opportunity to be in close proximity to them, but to be again it witness to the multifaceted wonder of life that shows up in children and as we grow.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast and for, teaching us about this because a lot of times people don't want to talk about these things or they're afraid to talk about these things, but it's just part of life and like you said, it's something natural that should be empowering. And
Hmm.
so I'm really glad you're willing to talk about it and even teach about it.
Yeah, thank you. I love it. It's just it. Yeah, it's just this calling. It just feels like, how can I not? It's just, and the joy that I have. And I think that was a part of my midlife sexual awakening, going from being so like getting grossed at, seeing a couple kissing at the fast food, at Dairy Queen or whatever, to, oh, all of life is erotic. And to be able to speak of it with ease and wonder and create these spaces for people. It's just, yeah, it's just a joy and an honor for me to have this role in life.
Mhm. So I have one last question. What
Yeah.
is your best advice on living an incredible, amazing life?
Mm. Well, if there were three things that I would say is first of all, connect. Connect into your own body and your own sexuality. That idea of looking outside is the mirror. And again, so come back home. Find the power, find your true essence. So connect with your body. The second one would be to feel. And again, we've been taught things we shouldn't feel. Women shouldn't feel sexual, but you're emotional. Men are sexual, but don't feel emotional. And so to be able to know, can we allow ourselves to feel all of it? The range of emotions that are there, that physical sensation that happens, that is connected to the emotions. So to feel as fully as we can. And the third one is to see life as a mirror. So when there's something that feels that it's out there, I should be out there. It's just kind of like, oh, can I just really come back home and feel? And again, it's all comes back to really feeling what's here, being there.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Lorna.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. I appreciate this opportunity and the privilege of being here and sharing this space with you and speaking to your listening audience. And however it supports people, I'm really honored by that. Thank you.
All right. We'll talk to you again soon.
Okay. Thank you so much.